During the midst of Kate Middleton's protracted disappearance from public life, we learned of the death of Thomas Kingston. Kingston was married to Lady Gabriella, the daughter of Prince Michael of Kent, a cousin of the late Queen. Now, his death may well have been a passing news item, a tragic footnote, had the press not included a rather curious addition to their reporting. But they did, and that addition is where this story begins. At the time of Kingston's death, Prince William was scheduled to not just attend, but to personally lead the memorial service of King Constantine of Greece, his godfather, who had passed away approximately a year prior. This was not a minor obligation. William had a specific, prominent, and public role in those proceedings, and yet, at the last minute, he abruptly pulled out, with his favorite Uncle Andy leading the service in his place. He did him a solid there, folks. William better not piss him off too much. The explanation offered was vague at best, citing a personal matter and nothing further. This sent immediate shockwaves through the press for several reasons. First, as I mentioned, he was supposed to lead the event, not just simply attend. Second, he lived in extremely close proximity to where the memorial was taking place. There was no logistical reason for his absence. And third, and this is the detail that blew the story wide open, the press felt compelled to state in their coverage that William's absence had nothing to do with Thomas Kingston's death. Now, folks, nobody had asked. There was no allegation on the table. No journalist had put that question to Kensington Palace, and yet there it was in black and white, a voluntary, unprompted clarification that the future King of England was not connected to the death of this man. The logical conclusion that any reasonable person draws from this is obvious. You do not deny an allegation that hasn't been made unless the allegation is already forming in rooms you cannot hear. Was this the press's way of obliquely signaling to the public that William's involvement was a question worth asking, while simultaneously giving themselves cover for appearing to dismiss it? I'll let you decide. Now, the next remarkable detail of this saga is that Kingston's death was not announced until 2 full days after it occurred. 2 days. In the era of instant news, round-the-clock media cycles, and a press corps that covers the royal adjacent world with extraordinary intensity, this man's death was sat on for 48 hours. A lot can happen in 48 hours, folks, as we will discuss shortly. Now, when William finally emerged later that week, he made a public appearance at a Holocaust memorial, and there, visible to anyone paying attention, were deep purplish bruises around his neck. No explanation was offered, and none was given. No statement was made from Kensington Palace. The press did not appear to ask, but regular people noticed, and the question that followed was entirely reasonable. Was this the reason why he pulled out so abruptly from the Constantine Memorial? Because he looked like a man who had been involved in a physical struggle. Did he need time for the visible evidence of that struggle to fade enough before appearing in public? In that same week, a story surfaced from the News International, a publication out of Pakistan, carrying the following headline: What would happen if Prince William was accused of a serious crime? Many of you will remember that when this came out, it lit the internet on fire. But here's what's buried in the lead, folks. When you check the byline and you look closely to see who wrote it, it simply says web desk. No name, no individual journalist. Now, I asked Gemini what it means when a story is authored that way, and the answer was, to put it mildly hair-raising. It indicated that web desk is sometimes used when a reporter wants to remain anonymous. Was this a tip-off from a UK outlet to a paper operating outside of the Rota? Now let's talk about who Thomas Kingston actually was, because the official narrative has done something to his reputation that I find particularly egregious. And I want to make sure you understand who this man was before we get into what they've tried to do to his legacy. Thomas Kingston was, by every account, a remarkable individual. He was barely into his 30s when he was already a successful analyst at Schroders, one of the most prestigious financial institutions in the world. An institution that, it should be noted, handles finances for members of the royal family. And if that weren't enough, he was also a hostage negotiator in Iraq. Now, I want you to sit with that for a moment. This was not a man coasting through life on connections and inherited access. This was a man of exceptional competence, exceptional nerve, and exceptional accomplishment. A man who had operated in genuine high-stakes situations, the kind where the wrong decision costs lives. Now look, folks, I'm not saying that most of us are underachievers here, but that's pretty impressive for someone who did all that before the age of 45, which is why this next point may be one of the most bothersome points in this entire saga for me. A full year after Thomas's death, the official narrative settled on the following explanation: that Thomas was depressed, that he had been prescribed antidepressants, and that he ultimately took his own life, driven in part by financial pressures surrounding Devonport Capital, the company he co-owned, which was said to be facing significant debts. However, reports indicate that Devonport Capital was not only solvent enough to service those debts, it still carried a surplus of approximately £2 million. £2 million in surplus. Does that sound like the financial picture of a man pushed to the edge? Does that sound like the kind of business failure that would break him? But here's the other problem. That business angle wasn't even a part of the original story. It was retrofitted, tacked on a full year after his death and after the antidepressant narrative, which itself didn't emerge until 9 months later, after Thomas died. So what we have is a cause of death that took 9 months to construct, and a supporting motive that was added on top of that, layer by layer, long after the body was gone, long after the questions had quieted down. And here's what makes it so particularly offensive. Every single person who knew Thomas Kingston described him as one of the most professionally competent individuals they had ever encountered. And now, in death, the official narrative wants us to quietly accept that he was a man who couldn't manage his own business affairs, that he was failing and that he crumbled. Thomas is no longer here to refute that. He cannot sit across from a camera and correct the record. He cannot produce the accounts or defend himself. And I have a strong feeling that a man of his caliber, a man who operated under the kind of pressure most of us will never experience, would have taken profound issue with being remembered that way. They couldn't just leave it at neurochemical complications brought on by antidepressant medication. They had to add more to the story, and that's what makes this whole thing even more suspicious to me. Which brings me to the official cause of death itself. Coroner Katie Skerritt stated that Thomas Kingston was found with massive trauma to the head and that a hunting rifle was discovered nearby. Everyone has naturally assumed that means he shot himself. The press assumed it, the public assumed it, and nobody really pushed back. But here's the problem. Where is the ballistics report? Where is the bullet trajectory analysis? Where are witness accounts of a gunshot being heard? Where is the forensic breakdown that you would expect, that you would require in any death involving a firearm? Because here is what the UK's National Ballistic Intelligence Service, NABIS, actually mandates. Whenever a death is caused by the discharge of a firearm in the United Kingdom, a thorough forensic protocol must be initiated within 48 hours of that death. That protocol exists to establish and document specific things, such as bullet fragments, spent cartridges, wound ballistics, including the trajectory of the bullet and gunshot residue on the skin and clothing of the deceased. 48 hours. That's 2 days, right, folks? And how long did they wait before announcing his death again? Yeah, that's right. 48 hours. Now, unless someone watching this has access to information that has never been made public, I can only conclude that this forensic record either does not exist or has not been disclosed, because Coroner Katie Skerritt's findings make no reference to any of it, no ballistics, no trajectory, and no residue. None of the things that NABIS describes as mandatory in reporting a death by firearm in the United Kingdom. Which opens a question that I don't think anyone has wanted to ask publicly. If there is no ballistics evidence establishing that the rifle was fired, that a bullet entered his body, that the weapon found nearby was the actual instrument of his death, then what exactly are we concluding? Could the head trauma have had another cause entirely? Could that rifle have been placed at the scene rather than discharged? Now, I'm not telling you that's what happened, folks. I'm telling you the evidence that would rule it out has never been produced. So let's take stock of everything we've just covered here. We have a future king connected to this death by the press without anyone asking. We have a 48-hour announcement delay that maps precisely onto the mandatory forensic window for firearm deaths under UK law. We have a coroner's finding that references head trauma and a nearby rifle, but contains none of the ballistic specifics that finding should legally require. We have a business failure narrative retrofitted onto a man whose company was, by reported accounts, still carrying a £2 million surplus. We have an antidepressant narrative that took 9 months to produce. We have a future king who reappeared days later and after that 48-hour window with unexplained bruising on his neck. And we have an anonymous reporter, unwilling to put their name to the question, asking in print what the legal consequences would be if that future king had committed a serious crime. And presiding over all of it is the posthumous rewriting of a man's legacy, a hostage negotiator, a gifted analyst, a successful venture capitalist, a person of exceptional accomplishment across two entirely different high-pressure disciplines, quietly recharacterized in death as someone who couldn't keep his own affairs in order? That, for me, is the most egregious part of it all. You can suppress a forensic report, you can manage a press cycle, you can delay an announcement by 48 hours and use that time however you need to use it, but to take a man's reputation, the thing he spent his entire life building, and rewrite it as a failure after he's gone is deliberate, and it tells me something very specific about the people who constructed this narrative and exactly how much they believed they could get away with. Now, I've already got about 15 pages on this, folks, which means if I keep going, we're looking at well over an hour video, and you all know how much I just love editing long videos, so you're going to have to wait for the next part. But until then, I'll leave you with one question to sit with. Why are there no photographs of Thomas with either William or Kate?